This next part, Brian, part two of our defensive line discussion, we want to talk about kind of what we know and the biggest questions. And so, there's a lot of returning talent, obviously, on this
It's
team.
basically what we know and what we don't know, right, Vince?
Yep,
I
absolutely.
mean, that's
Yep,
yeah,
what we know, biggest questions, what we don't know. It is exactly
right.
right. And so, jumping into the what we know first, there's a lot of returning talent here from last year's team. And as we kind of discussed in part one of the reasons Riley Mills is back is he didn't probably have the season overall that he wanted. And the feedback that he got from NFL teams said, hey, go back to school, I would imagine. Or he didn't get the grade that he wanted. Let's put it that way. And so he came back to school. And of course, Howard Cross has come back to school as well. And I remember the days that they announced that they were going to be coming back, and the fan in me got a little giddy inside because now Notre Dame has arguably two of the best defensive tackles in college football, or I should say the best combo of defensive tackles in the nation coming back for another year of college football. And we would be having a much different conversation if these two guys had decided to go to the NFL. And so what we know is that if, Riley Mills and Howard Cross just repeat the season that they had last year, they're going to be really good. If they come back and do the things that they are wanting to do to boost their stock to the NFL, they're going to be super elite good.
I think that's especially true for Riley.
Yes.
Like with Howard, I don't know Howard Cross personally, but what I have heard about him, it would not shock me if Howard came back. Look, first of all, when you're barely 6 feet tall and you're 280 pounds and you're a defensive tackle and at this level and you're an All-American, you are a gritty, hardworking kid that wants to get after it, right? So there's no complacency there. What I'm saying is this. But if you are that kind of kid, I can also understand if it's Howard Cross is like, look, I just am not done playing college football and I have things I want to accomplish in Notre Dame, even if it's not like, hey, I got to improve on this part of my game, right? Like Riley definitely, like I was told Howard was always leaning towards coming back because his breakout was kind of unexpected. From some things that Ryan and I heard during the season, there's a time where Riley was pretty much gone. He was going to leave. And didn't quite get the feedback that I think he that he was going to get, and so he came back. So he even more so than Howard has. I need to prove myself here. But even with Howard, I do think there's another level that Howard can get to. I mean, look, he had an All-American year, 7 tackles for loss, 2 sacks. Half of that production came against Duke. You know what I mean? He didn't have a sack, I don't think, until that game. I think he only had like 1 tackle for loss going. Vince, I don't know if I just went out just now. Like
you paused, and I wasn't sure if it was me or you. So I didn't.
It's me.
Okay.
What happened?
You just like
where
froze.
was I?
You were talking about Riley Mills and you just kind of like mid sentence froze.
Yeah, no, because I lost both of you, so I'm back now. So
yes, no, you're good now.
The point is, I think Riley has even more to prove, but I do think there's another level that Howard Cross can get to, and for both of them, it's back to what we talked about earlier. It's about finish. But at the end of the day, Vince, this defensive line is not going to make the jump because Riley and Howard get better.
Right.
They are already both very good.
Correct.
Now, is there a level for them to get better? Yes. But I don't think that's like, if I'm putting my priority list of things the D-line needs to do, this is not my priority number 1.
Sure.
Like if they just repeat. Now, here's the key though. Not everybody just keeps progressing. Some guys regress.
Sure, yeah.
They need to make sure that Howard Cross and Riley Mills don't regress. So now that's going to be a key. But as long as if they just do that, then they're going to be fine. If they get better, that's even better. But to me, it hinges on a lot more on other things that we'll get into. But it's nice. It's the foundation of knowing those two were here and those two were hungry, and the things that I had in my intel piece about the attitude they've had. They both come back with a little bit of a chip on their shoulder. I'm like, how does Howard Cross still have a chip on his shoulder? He's a second-team All-American last year. But I love it. But it's like, that's why a 6'1", 285-pound defensive tackle
does what he does.
Can
do
what he does because he kind of always plays with a chip on his shoulder. You 100%. Know what I mean? And so that's what you look at is like you have that foundation, and you're starting the season off with arguably the best 1-2 punch attack in the country. I think right now the only team that contends with them in regard to proven players. Now there's some teams that are going to have ascending really good D-tackle combos, but as far as what we know, is the Michigan duo of Kenneth Grant and Mason Graham. That's the only one to me that can contend with Riley Mills. You've got two guys. They are the only two defensive tackles in all of college football that coming back that ranked in the top 20 last year in pass rushing success and run success. The only two. The only team with two of those guys. Michigan had two guys in there too, but it was a different guy. It was three, because remember, Michigan had a great 3-man rotation last year. So they had two guys in the top 25 in one, two in the top 25 in other. Mason Graham, I think, was top 25 in both, but Kenneth Grant was top 25 in one, and Chris Jenkins was top 25 in another. For Notre Dame, it was those two. And if you look at Gabriel Rubio's grade, he was in there as well. It's the third. He's out now, right, which we'll get into. But those two guys were both in there. So you are starting the year off with an outstanding combination. Vince, you and I talk about this all the time. To be a great defense, you have to be great right up the middle on all three levels.
Sure.
And first line of attack, you feel pretty good about being very good when your starters are on the field.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, up the middle. It's baseball, football. You want to be good up the middle. And I like where Notre Dame is, especially on the defensive line, up the middle. Now, other things that we know that this defensive line is going to be deep. There's a chance they could play 10, maybe 11 guys, depending on how things shake out in the fall and depending on how some guys develop and, all of those things. I don't know when the last time we said that Notre Dame could go 10 or 11 deep on the defensive line and be legit.
I would argue, Vince, prior to Rubio's, I'm sorry, I didn't even interrupt you. I'm trying to get better about not interrupting.
No, you're good.
I would argue that they could go 3 deep prior to Rubio's injury.
So it would be 12.
Because your third team would be Junior Chalamock at Viper, Bryce Young at defensive end, Donovan Heinisch at nose, and then who's your Armo Muka, maybe somebody like that, or excuse me, Donovan Heinisch is your number 3 technique. And then either Armo Mukum or Sean Sevalon or something like that at nose. Like, I think you were a legitimate 3 deep of guys that can help you right now.
Sure.
Right? And, those are the
would
things
you trust all 12 of those guys
to play?
In the Texas A&M game, for example.
To play. Yes,
okay.
to play.
Okay.
Now, the question is, and we'll get into this next, that you do have to ask yourself, okay, are you trusting them to play or to make plays? That's a different conversation.
Okay, yeah, that's fair.
Very different conversation, because a lot of those guys I don't trust to make plays. I just say, hey, look, you can spell this guy. You can spell this guy. You can play short yardage. You can play goal line. You have 12 guys that can help you in some capacity right now.
Okay.
There's no doubt. And it's an athletic group.
It's
a very athletic group of players. I mean, your third team is a 5-star freshman defensive end, a former top 150 recruit at Viper. For those people that care about such things, Donovan Heinisch is a very athletic player. Jason Rubio is a very athletic player. Josh Burnham, RJ Oben are both good athletes. Boubacar Traore is a very athletic player. You've got a very athletic group of players. That's the other thing. It's not a real big D line. It's not a very big defensive line. They don't try to play like a big defensive line.
I was going to say, that's not exactly who Al Golden
they are.
is looking for. Like, that's not really somebody that
they
fits.
want disruptors.
Yeah, exactly.
And you need athletic guys to be disruptors, and they have that.
Right.
We'll talk about the next level for that group here when we get into the next section of the show. But you do know you have bodies.
Correct.
You have good bodies, talented, long, athletic, talented bodies. And that's kind of the third part, right, Vince, is it's talented.
There's talent, and some of it's unproven, right? But there is talent there. And
Right.
if you want to go off of recruiting rankings, if you want to go off of what we just see with our naked eye, I had mentioned when I was at practice the other day with you and I had to walk past the defensive line and they were doing their tackling circuit and they were, sprinting over some dummies with high knees and, kind of going through a little bit of a gauntlet type of deal. And it's just like, they didn't look like defensive linemen. You know what I mean? They just looked like massive athletic guys going through this drill. I mean, they a lot of people think of defensive line. You just think of like these 350-pound guys that are just space eaters and stuff like that. Now, is there a place for guys like that? Sure. But this particular group is just athletic. There's a bunch of long guys in there. There's a bunch of fast twitch guys in there. They're just an athletic group overall, and it stands out when you see them in person. And so that, it's hard for a lot of things to stand out when guys are just running around in helmets, but that is definitely one thing that stands out is they are athletic, they're long, and they're quick. And those are the kind of guys that will excel inside of Al Golden's defense. That's what he wants. He wants guys that are fast twitch. They're going to get off the ball. They're going to be able to twist and, slant and do some different things and just, really mess with an offensive line, get in the backfield and then cause some disruption. I mean, that's what he wants. And I have to say that this defensive line kind of checks a lot of those boxes. Now, we're going to talk in a second about, some questions, what we don't know and things like that. There's some unproven talent in there. We haven't seen them do it on a Saturday, right? We've seen them do it in high school, but we haven't seen them do it, in a Notre Dame uniform on a consistent basis. But man, is there a lot of talent there. There's no doubt about that. So there we go. Let's transition over to the next part of this particular conversation. It's our biggest question marks or what we don't know. And let's move a little bit to the outside and kind of the hanging question that we seem to have a lot going into the season. And this season is no different. Will Viper be any better? Will Viper be that position that Notre Dame needs it to be?
That might be the biggest question mark on this team, on this defense for me. I mean, honestly.
Yeah.
Like, here's the thing. They don't need Viper to be any better than it was last year to be a top 10 D-line because they had a top 10 D-line last year and the Viper position gave you very little.
Very little. So little.
So it's like people talk about like, oh, the Viper's my only concern. It's my concern too.
Yeah.
But what is the concern in regard to that they're going to be a good D-line? No, because they were in excellent D-line last year and the Viper position wasn't very good. But the Viper position not giving you much is what hurts you in those games because, like, right now you're basically saying, Howard and Riley, we need you to ball every game. Defensive ends, we need you to ball every game because Viper ain't helping out, right? Like, we're not getting anything from them. We need you. So when they don't play there, you are in trouble.
Yeah.
That's when you have your down game. So you need the Viper position to be able to be a consistent producer.
Right.
Not elite production, but just more than what you did last
Hold
year.
Their own. I mean,
then have a few games where they play well. Like last year, there was like no games where the Viper position was a strength. None. I can't think of one anyway where you go like, oh, Viper was good this game. I can't think of one. You need at least 3 or 4 games. You're like, hey, Viper's pretty good this game.
Yeah.
That's going to be a big key, Vince, because if they don't play better, it hurts your ability to really make that jump as a group.
Sure.
And then, we'll get into some specific players later, but that position has to give you much better production than it had last year. I mean, I'm looking at the numbers now, Vince, and you look at like you just look at the total production. Like Junior Tuihalamaka was your 2A and 2B last year at backup Viper. You had Burnham was part of it. Burnham did well, I thought. Burnham had 4 tackles for loss and had a sack as a backup defensive
It didn't seem like
end.
he was on the field very often, but
not a ton. But Josh Burnham had 4 tackles for loss last year. Your starter only had 4.5, and 4 of those tackles for loss came on sacks.
Yeah,
so you didn't get a whole lot out of Jordan Botelho, and then 1.5 of his tackles for loss and 1 of his sacks came in a bowl game against Oregon State's backup offensive tackles. So, like during the regular season, your starting Viper gave you 3 tackles for loss. That's it.
Yeah.
Now, and Josh Burnham had 4 tackles last year. 1.5 of his last season was in the bowl game, right? So now you're talking about 3 from your starter, 2 from your primary backup, and 0 from your other backup. You got 6.5. Wait a minute. Hold on. Am I doing the math correctly? You got 3. You had 5.5 tackles for loss last year from your Viper position in the regular season. 5.5. That's it. Like that's really bad.
Yeah.
Like, Vince, that's really bad.
It's not good.
And Nana Osafo-Mensah, the backup defensive end, had 5.5 by himself. And so you're talking about your entire position group gave you 5.5 tackles for loss. Oh, and by the way, Nana gave you 5.5 last year by himself, didn't play in the bowl game. And you still had a top 10 D line. Right. So any improved production from this group is a bonus.
Mm-hmm.
But again, what's the standard? The standard is, can you play for a championship? And if this unit is gonna go into the postseason, and if this team is gonna, part of it is they may get some lucky breaks as far as who they play. But if they have to play Ohio State again, what hurt Notre Dame in the fourth quarter of that game? They couldn't get consistent pressure on Kyle McCord without blitzing. So on 4th and 7, they had to bring pressure because you could otherwise he's going to sit back there all day and pick you apart. You couldn't get pressure with your front four. You had to bring a blitz. What does that mean? It means they're going to get in a good matchup and they're going to convert a 4th and 7, which is exactly what they did. Right. You're going to need this position more than any other. This is the biggest question mark, in my opinion, of the entire defensive side of the ball.
Sure.
Are they going to repeat what they did last year, or are they going to be better? Because it's basically kind of the same group. You lose Burnham and you add Boubacar. It's the same exact group. I mean, Junior Talamaka, Jordan Botelho, Boubacar Traore. That's going to be the rotation. Can they give you more than what they got last year? I should add the position group gave you 6.5 tackles for loss because I forgot about Boubacar's sack against USC. So I was way off. It's not good.
How dare you?
It's not good. And so that's the thing for me, is that group more than any other has to get a lot. I mean, you've got to double your production. I mean, is that fair to say, Vince?
Yeah. And I don't think that should be that hard.
Tackles for loss. That's it.
That's
not even what Isaiah Foskey did by himself in the previous 2 years, Vince.
This is what I'm saying.
So you got to double your production, and it's got to be somewhat meaningful production. It can't be you have 5 tackles for loss against Navy against triple option, and you had 3 tackles for Illinois,
Miami of Ohio.
Exactly.
Right.
You got to be competent at those other positions.
Right.
Look, I'm confident defensive end is going to be really good. I'm confident the defensive tackles and the nose tackles are going to be really good. Viper's the one I have no clue how good they're going to be.
Look, I have dabbled in betting, never really over $5 a bet, right? I don't know that I would place a bet that the Viper position is going to be that much better than it was last year. I am so much in the you've got to show me something, Jordan Botelho. You've got to show me something, Viper position, in order for me to be a believer at this point. I'm just being honest about where I'm at with this group. I feel like I've seen this show before. I've gotten excited before, and I've been let down before. Now, I still think this defense is going to be really good, and you did a great job of illustrating why this defense can still be really, really good without the production of the Viper, but think how good they can be with some production from the Viper. Like, that's the biggest thing for me. You have been in this defense for 3 years now. You're super athletic. You're long. You're all of these different things.
Well, one of the guys at the position is super athletic. The other two are just good athletes for the position, not elite. I just want to make sure that I don't think Jordan Botelho and Jordan Botelho are super athletic. I think Boubacar is.
Yeah, right. But and you know what? If Boubacar is who we think he could be, let's go, buddy. Like now's the time. You've got an opportunity here to climb the depth chart, in my opinion. Now, I don't know. And again, you've said this before, and I'll kind of reiterate it real quick. Whoever starts the game, that's one thing. Who's in the game when it matters? Who's in the game when you need to stop a drive, you need a team to go 3 and out, you need to create a turnover, you need to do this, you need to do that. Who's in the game then? I think that's going to tell us something. In my opinion, this position's wide open. And I know that Jordan Botelho is the starter, and I get all of that. He's been around. To me, this position should be wide open.
I think what I agree and disagree. I disagree in that we know who the DNs are going to be. The Vipers are going to be. We know who they're going to be. Where I think it's wide open, to your point, Vince, and correct me if this is not what you're saying, is we know who they're going to be, but we don't know what the snap distribution is going to be.
That's
among
exactly
those
what
three.
I was saying. Yes.
And that's going to be something that's up for debate. And
look,
I would say I hope Jordan Patejo is the starter because he's your veteran. He's your experienced guy.
He should be.
He's the guy that's had some of those flashes, but they're going to need Junior to be better, and they're going to need Boubacar to step up.
Yeah.
And Patejo's got to get a lot better. There's no excuse for Patejo. Now, good thing is, if you are on the board, you would have read this well over a week ago, almost 2 weeks ago now. That's been the feedback so far this summer, is this is the most locked in that Jordan Patejo's ever been.
Great.
He realizes this is his last chance. But I'm going to say about Jordan Patejo what I've said all summer and what I said about Marist all summer the year before. That sounds great. I need to see it. I need to see it.
Exactly.
Right, before I'm going to buy in. But if he does step up, that's huge. They need him to be better. They need him to be the best version of himself. And we've seen it. This isn't like we're trying to rely on what he did in high school. This is a guy that had 10 quarterback pressures in the bowl game against South Carolina, Vince.
Right.
In one game. Ryan and I sat there almost field level, the way that Syracuse stadium is, and watched Jordan Patejo just look great against Syracuse. Like, we've seen him do it. It's not about, well, he was really highly ranked, and based on that, we're just waiting on the breakout to come. Right? No, it's we've seen him do it. I just want him to be able to do that in back-to-back games.
Right.
That's all I'm asking. I mean, heck, he only had 18 pressures last year. 3 of them came against Ohio State. He had a hit on the quarterback. And I mean, it's so you just need to see that more consistently. That's gonna be the key. Is he needs to be more consistent. And yeah, I mean, it's the biggest key. It's the biggest key to this. That position getting better is the biggest key to this defensive line, and we're about to talk about number 2.
Well, and I'll just say this, and it'll kind of transition us to the other side of the defensive line. I said this before on the night show, and I'll say it here, and it's a little out there, and I'm fine with that. I would not be upset if they moved Josh Burnham over to that side and he just balls out to Viper.
Yeah, not going to happen.
I get it.
I asked about that.
Did you ask about that?
Yeah, I did.
All right.
Well, part of it is because of how, and we'll get into Burnham and Boubacar here in a little bit because we're going to talk about both of them in the breakout section. But that's the reason why.
Okay.
It doesn't mean that it's not good. It may not happen eventually, but I'll just say this: if they move Burnham to Viper, it's because things went poorly.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, I think to me, and again, this is Vince talking. This is not intel. This is not if things aren't going the way they want them to go at Viper. I feel like Josh, and we'll talk about him in the breakouts. So, spoiler alert, you just said it, but I feel like he's going to have such a year that if they're having issues on Viper, they'll be like, you know what? We need to get this kid on the field more often. Anyway, let's move him over and let him ball out. You know what I mean? And that's how it's kind of like a combination. It's like, okay, they're not doing as well as they should. Josh is doing super well. Let's get him on the field more often. Like, that's how I see that in my own sick brain. But
the other thing is, and let's kind of talk about this as question number 2. The question now is, can the big ends, the defensive ends, because the way, just so people understand, when we say defensive end, that's one position in the Notre Dame defense.
Right.
That's the field end, the big end. They call it defensive end. The Viper is the Viper. It's the weak side end is the Viper. So when we say defensive end, we're talking about that. And then there's 3 technique in those tackles, just so people understand. And so when you look at that position, it was a strength for Notre Dame last year. It was the biggest question mark going into the season, and it became a strength. Javonte Jean-Baptiste was a great pickup last year, and Nana was one of the more underappreciated players on the line. He gave you 5.5 tackles for loss and 3 sacks off the bench last year. You want to know why you're able to be a top 10 defensive line with your Viper giving you almost nothing production-wise? Because you had one of the best D-tackle combos in college football. And at big end, you had Baptiste and Nana gave you 16 tackles for loss and 8.5 sacks. 8 sacks. That's what it was. Now the question is, can they get that kind of production again this year? That's the big question.
Right. With a whole new cast of characters over there. I mean, you lost a guy who was an absolute revelation at defensive end last year in Javonte Jean-Baptiste and what he was able to do. And Nana obviously backed him up very, very well. And they were just super strong over there. So now you go and you bring in RJ Oben from Duke. And, I understand that he had not issues. That's not right. But like, this is a different defense. And so he's asked to do some different things and to, he's not just a rush end, like he was at Duke. He's going to have to do some different stuff. And so that transition has been a transition. I mean, I'm not saying he's not going to be able to do it, but there was a bit of a transition when he first got over here. And so now he's really kind of settling in, which is great to see. And then you've got Josh Burnham, who, as I said earlier, it didn't feel like he played a whole lot last year. He's going to get a lot of opportunity this year to play.
Yeah.
And, big shoes to fill for both of these guys.
Yeah.
And so you've got kind of the same cast of characters on one side at Viper, and you've got a new cast of characters on the other side at defensive end who have big shoes to fill and need to, essentially be a strength of this defensive line. Can they do it?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a big question. I feel confident that it can happen, but we won't know until the season starts and we see what they do game in and game out.
Well, the good news is RJ Oben is an experienced player. I mean, this is a guy that brings over 20 career tackles for loss. I think he's got about 14 or so career sacks.
He was a leader on that defense. I mean,
he
they went as he went.
I mean, now he's had an adjustment period.
Yeah.
He went from being sort of like a wide edge rusher that just kind of came after the quarterback to now they're asking to be an all-around player. That's kind of Javonte was a bit more of an all-around guy at Ohio State, but he was more of a backup edge rusher type of guy.
He didn't have the proven production and being a starter and all of that. So therein lied the question mark for us going into last year.
And he was great. And Al Washington did a great job getting him ready to go. Now it's up to Coach Washington to get the same thing with RJ Oben. But you at least know there's a baseline, a floor with RJ. RJ, at the very least, is going to be better than what Nana was. At the very least.
Agreed.
The question is, can he be as good as Javonte was? And then you've got Josh Burnham at the position. And say, okay, well, can he be better than Nana? Can he be better than Javonte? Can they as a duo be better? That's the question. But here's one thing this group has that last year's group didn't have. They've got a third guy to play in this position. And we'll talk more about him specifically coming up, and that's Bryce Young. And so the reason that I'm excited about the end position is that there is a level of proven production at the position in RJ Oben. There's a level of there's a high level amount of talent behind him in Josh Burnham and Bryce Young. And the fact that you're not just counting on one guy to hopefully replace what you had last year is always a reason, Vince, why I feel good about this position being good, because they don't need all three of them to be good. They just need two of them to be good.
Yeah.
And I think at least two of them will be good. So I'm actually not worried about this position group. However, that's my emotional feeling, right? There's nothing practical about how I'm feeling other than emotionally and from an evaluation standpoint of what guys are talent-wise. But as I've said a million times, Vince, potential does not win you football games. Production does.
Darn right.
Right? And potential will get you beat. Because what I mean by that is if all we're doing is talking about what you can potentially be, it means you aren't that right now. And if you aren't that right now, then the production is not going to match the potential. You want a guy to be good, not could be good.
Right.
And that's going to be the question. So even though from my evaluation standpoint, emotionally, my feeling about the big end position, the defensive end position is good, we also have to be able to look at it and objectively say it's still a question mark because Burnham hasn't proven that he can do it. He had 4 tackles for loss and a sack last year. That's not proven production, right? Love the talent, love the potential. Now it's show me mode. RJ Oben was very good with what they asked him to do at Duke. Notre Dame's asked him to do a lot more than he did at Duke. They're asking him to be a much more diverse, versatile, all-around player than what he was at Duke. Those are all questions that we don't know if they can play to that level.
Sure.
The talent's there, though. That's the exciting thing, and that's what we know. Talented group. But does the talent turn into production? And does it turn into production? Like, I fully expect Josh Burnham and RJ Oben to eat up Northern Illinois and Miami and Ohio.
Oh, sure. Like they better.
Are they going to be able to go in there in College Station and handle business against the Texas A&M tackles? Are they going to be able to go up against Louisville's tackles and get after the quarterback in that game? Can they go against a very veteran group of offensive linemen? Darius Washington is on my first team all preseason, all opponent team. He was voted preseason all ACC, first team all ACC by the media. Are they going to be able to go against him and have success? Those are very good questions, Vince. And that's why I have to look at and say, yeah, I love the talent and I think they're going to be good, but we need to see it. We need to see it. Now, if you want to, kind of get into a little bit of, okay, I feel good about it. RJ Oben did have 4 pressures in a hit on the quarterback last year against Florida State. So, I mean, we have film of him going against them. He led Duke, and if you remember, Duke had a lead late in the game against Florida State on the road until once Riley Leonard went out, that's when it kind of went downhill for them.
Sure.
But RJ Oben actually played pretty well against them, I felt, from a pass rushing standpoint last season. So, 4 pressures and 26 pass rush snaps is a pretty good performance. And it was his third highest of the year behind. He had 3 against Clemson. And that's the thing about RJ. It's like, yeah, he's got to show, but guy had 5 pressures last year against Clemson, three hits and a sack, according to Pro Football Focus. Had 3 pressures against NC State, who was an 8-9 win team last year, 5 pressures against Northwestern, who was a bowl team last year. So, I mean, 3 pressures on the road against Drake May in North Carolina. So he did play well in the biggest moments. That is one thing I really like about him. Now we just need to see if he can do that consistently, and we need to see if Josh Burnham can be the guy that we think he is. Sure. That's going to be the key. I'm optimistic about it, but we also have to be honest and say it's still a question mark.
One of the things that you had mentioned or that we talked about kind of earlier and how deep this team could potentially go, and it's the depth. And we like to talk about the depth. We talk about them going 10, 11, 12 deep, actually playing in a game. But what kind of production is that depth going to produce? I think your exact quote was, yes, they'll play. Are they playmakers? I think that's a legit question. And how deep on that depth chart can you go and still find playmakers, right? I mean, we as fans, Notre Dame was an eyelash away from their 2 starting defensive tackles being in the NFL. And these depth pieces that we're all excited about being depth pieces would have been starters, And so what does that do to your depth? And how does that make your depth even stronger now that those guys have come back? And so I think the biggest question about the defensive line as far as depth is concerned is how far down are you going to go before you stop hitting playmakers and you start just hitting guys that are playing? And I think that's a definitive answer that, we're not going to get right away. Obviously, we can hear the coaches and hear what they have to say, and they're excited about these guys and, all these different things, but can those guys make plays when it matters? That's what counts.
Yeah. I mean, can Jason Onye take what he did in the spring into the fall?
Sure.
Where he was disruptive and one of their better defensive linemen. Can the guys behind, can Junior Tielmach and Boubacar Traore step up? Can Josh Burnham and RJ Oben, can that depth of that group give you plays? Can Bryce Young help you out? Can Donovan Heinisch be even better than he was a solid player last year in his first year in the rotation, showed some promise, a little light in the pants, which he's young. He kind of got thrust into the rotation early when Gabriel
welcome to being
down.
a Heinisch, being light in the pants a little bit.
But Kurt's bigger than him, but Donovan's more athletic. I would argue Donovan has more talent than Kurt did. Kurt was Kurt was going to give you everything he had. I really feel like Kurt's whole goal in life was to make me look stupid. I really do. Because every time I'd say something negative about him, he'd go out the next week and have the best game of his career.
Yeah,
what? I love that about him.
Yes.
But Donovan's more physically gifted. He's just not as big as Kurt was at that same age. Because remember, Kurt played as a true freshman at Notre Dame. But he's a year older. He's a year stronger. Yeah. He's got another year in the weight room and those type of things. Because so he's now in that role where he's not helping you because he has to, because Gabriel got hurt. He's now going to help you this year because he's ready to help you. Can he make more plays than he did last year? That's a legitimate question. When Gabriel Rubio comes back, Gabriel was a really good run stuffer, but he didn't make a ton of plays. Can he make more plays this year? That's going to be the question, Vince, because, you've seen some Notre Dame teams that have some really good I almost said great. The 2012 team had a great starting defensive line. The 2015 team had a really good starting defensive line. The problem in both situations was when they went to their next group, there was a big drop-off. Love Tony Springman, great effort guy, big drop-off between Lewis Nix and Tony Springman. Big drop off between Capron Lewis Moore and Kona Schwenke, the late Kona
Sure.
Schwenke. Big drop off between Stephon Tuitt and a true freshman version of Sheldon Day, right? Just big drop off. Just like in 2015, there was a big drop off between Sheldon Day, who had one of the best D tackle seasons the Notre Dame guys had in 20 years, with 15 and a half tackles for loss in 2015, to whoever they brought in to off the bench. You know what I mean? And same thing at nose tackle, because you were already down Jerron Jones, and then got Jerry Tillery, and there was a drop off when Jerry Tillery came off the field, and they put Daniel Cage on the field. There was a big drop off when Isaac Rochelle or Romeo Okwara weren't on the field. There just was a bigger drop off. The great defenses, and Ryan and I have talked about this in the past with like that 2021 and 22 Georgia team, they would have a guy come off the field and put a future first-round draft pick. I mean, in 2021, Jalen Carter didn't even start for Georgia all the time.
It's crazy. The depth that they had was unreal.
Right.
It was unreal.
Right. So you got to find out if Notre Dame can have guys, when those guys come on the field, can they give you play? Can they not just give you snaps, but can they make plays for you? Because remember in 2022, Al Golden would do like mass substitutions on the D-line. And it's like almost every time he'd almost do like a mass substitution to the number twos, and the other team would go like right down the field and score. And you're like, dude, you got to stop doing that. Now you say, oh, you know what? We may see that a little bit this year, and you feel good about it because of Onye and Heinisch. And then when Rubio comes back and you've got Burnham or Oben and Boubacar out there, like, you know what? They're going to be all right. They're going to be all right. That's going to be a key. Can they provide that for you? And the potential's there, Vince. But again, the concern, the reason these things are being talked about in the question mark area is because right now it's still all about potential.
Yeah.
And it hasn't turned into proven production.
And it's confident potential on our part. I mean, we're confident that these guys are going to be able to do certain things and rack up certain stats and, all of the like, but it still hasn't happened yet. And that's why it's still a question mark. I mean, I would like to think that we're always right, but it would be nice to see it on the field as well. And so that's why it's still a question mark for us and why we have to put it under the question mark category, because it's something that we haven't seen on a consistent basis on a Saturday in a Notre Dame uniform. And that's the fun part about college football, is the turnover and all of those different things. And I think at the end of the day, if these question marks that we have get answered in a positive manner, even mostly answered in a positive manner, this defensive line is going to be really, really, really good. Before we move on to section number 3, or I guess 4 today, make sure you hit the like button, the subscribe button, that notification bell, share with your family and friends, and make sure you jump on the boards.irishbreakdown.com. Well, again, we are going to be hitting practice tomorrow, and there's going to be a practice report put up as soon as we get done, and the only place where you're going to be able to find that is on the boards. So make sure you sign up and you are ready to rock and roll.